Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm glad that you're here this week again for Imaginary Creatures. Well, this is part 3 of our lesson and about Jason and the Golden Fleece. So this week we're going to be talking about whatever happened and did he manage to get that Golden Fleece, because he has gone on a hero's quest. And so he's been tasked with the job of saying that he is going to go and try to get this Golden Fleece. And the reason he's doing that is for his father and for redemption of his kingdom. Because as we looked back last week, just as a review, you remember that what he was trying to do was to restore the kingdom to the rightful king, which is his father, Aeson. And remember, his dad was quite a weak fellow, although he was nice. And so he had lost the kingdom to his brother, who is now in charge. And his name is Aedes. And so that's where he's going, is to try to wrest the kingdom. That means to get it back from his uncle. And so he has gotten a band of people together, and he was trained. You remember when he grew up, the one thing his dad did do right was although he was living in poverty because he was kicked out, he did send his son to be trained by Chiron, who was a centaur. And usually centaurs were not, they were sort of monstrous creatures. But in this case, Chiron was very wise, and he was the best person for the job because he trained up Jason to be a wonderful, wise, and heroic figure to go on the hero's journey that we've been taking. So let me share the screen with you so we can get started and see how his journey ends up this week. So we're going to do that right now. Oops, let me stop sharing and try that again. And off we go here. All right, so here we have the picture just to review. There is Chiron training Jason as he's growing up. And here are the Argonauts. That's the band of heroes that he got to go with him on his ship, which, as you recall, was called the Argo. All right, let's start our story then. For many weeks and months, Jason and his crew of bold adventurers sailed on the Argo. And when the wind failed, or when they were in dangerous waters, they took to their oars and they guided the ship through each perilous situation. They visited many islands and encountered many strange creatures along the way. They fought with a band of hideous giants, each having 6 hands. They escaped from the water nymphs who wanted to imprison them in their crystal caves, and they slew vicious harpies, whose frightful flying creatures with hooked beaks and iron claws and shrieking cries. And they navigated through the treacherous wandering rocks, which would suddenly crash together when a ship tried to pass between them. After all these and other adventures as well, the Argonauts finally arrived in Colchis and were brought to the palace of the king. Now the king, whose name was Aedes, had 2 children, a little boy of whom he was very fond, and a dark-eyed, dark-haired daughter named Medea, who was a witch and had many magical ways about her. Aedes was seated on his throne with his little son at his feet, and Medea was at his right hand when the Argonauts were brought before him. Jason was asked what his business was in Colchis, and when he answered that he had come to take the Golden Fleece back to Greece, the king laughed out loud and said, "You have come on a very bold mission, but the Fleece of Gold can be won only by those with great courage. You can perform 3 tasks, and if you can, I set out for you. Then, and only then, will I know such courage as yours, and only then will I allow you to carry away the fleece." Now, the tone in which the king made this challenge showed that he was not afraid of losing the golden fleece, but Jason was not discouraged, and he asked the king to tell him about the three tasks that he must perform. The first task, the king replied, is to yoke two fierce fire-breathing bulls to the plow, and with them to till 4 acres of land. The next is to sow the field with dragon's teeth, and to conquer all the armed warriors that will then spring up out of the earth from those teeth. And the third is to kill the fierce dragon that never sleeps by day nor by night. When you have succeeded in doing these three things, you may take the golden fleece back with you to Greece. Having said this to Jason, the king dismissed all the Argonauts with a wave of his hand. Although Jason would not let the king see it, he was a little discouraged when he heard what the tasks were. He walked away from the palace down toward the shore where the Argo was anchored, and he thought of Hera's promise that he wished that she would help him now. We mentioned that her name was Juno before, and you remember that the Romans and the Greeks had the same gods, but they called them different things. So Juno and Hera play the same part in myths. When he came to the ship, he found that there was help awaiting for him, for Medea had found that she was deeply in love with him and had come to talk with him and offer her aid. She promised to tell Jason certain secrets that would help him to do the tasks that seemed so impossible if in return he would make her his wife and take her back with him to his home in Greece. It may seem strange that Medea was willing to leave her home and all her people who loved her to go so far away with this stranger. Indeed, the girl herself hardly knew why she did it, but in truth, Hera, who had not forgotten her promise to help Jason, and the only way she could do it was by making Medea fall in love with her so much that she would be willing to give up everything for his sake. And so it was really Hera who was helping Jason. The king's daughter gave Jason a magic potion from one of her magic bottles. And that was to protect whoever was anointed with it from harm by either swords or fire. And then she told him what he must do to overcome the fierce bulls and the armed men. After she left him, he paced up and down the seashore for a long time, thinking about Medea and about the tasks the morrow would bring. The next morning, all the people of Colchis went in a great crowd to the field where Jason was to meet his death, as they thought. In the midst of them sat King Aeetes himself with Medea at his right hand. In all that vast crowd, she was the only one who dared to hope that Jason would be successful. All the rest of them thought, oh, he is never going to make it. He will surely lose his life. As soon as Jason entered the field, the two bulls came snorting and bellowing toward him. If you could have seen the creatures, you would have believed, as all the people did, that Jason's last hour had come. They were great, ugly creatures with hoofs of brass and horns pointed with iron. As they came trampling along, making the ground tremble at each step of their brazen hoofs, they breathed out curling flames from their nostrils so that the fields and the air itself seemed to be on fire. But Jason did not feel the heat of the flames, thanks to Medea's magic potion. He went up to close to the angry creatures and, seizing them by the horns, dashed their heads quickly together until the bulls were stunned. Then he swiftly slipped the yoke over their heads. The bulls were now as gentle as cows, and Jason plowed the 4 acres in straight ridges and furrows. So he made it through the first challenge, didn't he? Well, that was a surprise, wasn't it? Let's see how he does on the next one, okay? Next, he was given a sack of dragon's teeth. See that, and he was supposed to put those in the ground and sow them. That means like he would put little seeds in the ground and push them under the ground as so hopes that something would grow. And he sowed these teeth on the left and the right in the soil he had just turned up. In less time than it takes to tell, a mass of helmets began to show above the ground, just as little leaves pierce through the soil in the springtime. But whereas the leaves are followed by pretty blossoms, these helmets covered a very ugly crop of fierce armed soldiers who leaped out of the furrows, all furious for battle, and rushed to slay Jason. Remembering Medea's advice, he picked up a large stone and threw it into their midst, which caused each of the soldiers to think that his neighbor had thrown the stone. They turned their attention away from Jason, and instead they turned upon each other with their spears and swords. In a few minutes, they were all fighting and struggling in a confused mass. And they fought so fiercely that in a short time, the field was strewn with the heads and bodies of the men who sprung up from the dragon's teeth. So that worked really well. They all fought each other. And in the end, Jason was free and he was successful in that mission too. Who would have thought? So Medea saved the day again. So now he has 2 missions accomplished. Of course, the people all rejoiced at Jason's success, but the king looked angry and sullen. He didn't expect Jason to come through one of those, much less 2, did he? He knew very well that Jason could not have succeeded except by the aid of magic, and he suspected that in some way Medea had helped this stranger. Therefore, when Jason asked for leave to begin his 3rd task, the king answered that he had done enough for one day and that he should rest until tomorrow. But that evening, Medea, who could see that her father suspected her, came to Jason and told him that he must kill the dragon that very night and then sail for home. She said that she feared her father would put her to a cruel death and that he planned for some harm to befall the Argonauts as well. She told Jason that she would make a drug that would put the dragon to sleep, and Jason made his way alone into the dark forest. He had not gone far when he noticed a golden light among the forest trees, and he knew that he must be near the treasure he was seeking. Was the treasure? It was the golden fleece, wasn't it? So he went along carefully, and when he came within sight of the dragon, he doused his spearhead with the magic drug, and he cast his spear with a mighty throw, just as Chiron had taught him. The point pricked the dragon's side, and the beast hissed and roared so loudly that all the people in Colchis were shaken from their beds. Soon the drug had taken effect, and the wounded dragon lay down fast asleep. Jason seized the golden fleece from the branches of the sacred oak tree where it hung, shining like a golden cloud at dawn, and he hurried back to the ship. So the 3rd thing and the final thing that he had really gone to the island for, which was to get the golden fleece, mission accomplished, right? Okay, let's see what happens next. There he is. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to show you that slide sooner, but there he is. The Argonauts were very glad to see him, and taking Medea in his arms and carry him aboard the Argo, they called for the anchor to be lifted and for the sails to be unfurled. And they began to pull away from the shore. And as they did, the people of Colchis came running down to the shore, and they launched volleys of arrows into the bay, but these were deflected by the shields of the Argonauts. And soon the ship was far out to sea, heading home, carrying the golden fleece. After a long, hard journey filled with even more adventures, they at last reached their homeland. Jason banished his uncle from the kingdom and set his father back on the throne. Thus he fulfilled his vow, and the Argonauts had shown that they truly were heroes, still alive in the land. You remember last week, his uncle had said there is no such thing as a hero anymore, and Jason had said, yes, yes, there are heroes. So he had proved it. Aeson, his father, had grown young again. As for the king, he had grown young again because Medea used a potion to give to him to help him grow younger again. So he grew young again because of that potion when his son returned, and he ruled his kingdom in peace for many, many years. So that is the end of the story of Jason and the Argonauts and Jason and Medea. And there are, I must tell you, some variations to this story that have been told over the years because it's a very, very, very old story. This story is from about 400 BC, so it's many thousands of years old. And just like we kind of embellish and tell stories and change them in our families over the years, this story, because it is so old, has been written in different ways and told in different ways. So I have told you the story as it was told years and years and years ago, and you may have heard a slightly different version of this story. And we tell stories like this to try to explain why things have happened in different parts of the country. And some people think that this story was told to explain why there was gold in certain parts of Greece. And there are many other reasons, as we've talked about, with why there are the various gods that are talked about. And there's lots of parts of this story that I didn't have time to tell you. So if you're interested in this story, you can look up the characters that are in the Argonauts. You can look up a lot of the different things that I didn't tell you about Jason and Medea and what happened to them. And so if you like the story, keep reading more about it. Now, I wanted to also tell you that the Greeks placed a lot of value on wisdom and those who were wise, like Chiron, the centaur. And although he was only half man and half horse, he was given care of training the royal children, like we talked about before. And Sophos is the Greek word for wise. And we have that in some of our words today. So we can see that still in our modern word of philosopher, philosopher as in Sophos. And we can still see it in sophisticated, which means cultured or worldly wise. So I thought you might like to see that in our words that we have today. Some of the words, the Greek words from the stories that are really long and old words, we still come back to us today from these stories and from these characters. So I hope that you have a good week. See if there's any links down below that you're interested in. Tell me how you liked this story, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.